So how can you get into the mind of the AI when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons with it? See what it's thinking and kind of get that kind of fun idea of what's going on when it's asking things. Well, in part one, I showed you how to use Model Context Protocol servers, tools, if you will, to have Claude call out to those tools when you're solo role-playing with it to make it a little better about how it's being a dungeon master for your solo role-playing. Went over the basics of how to do it. You can go check that video out. But in this episode, what I'm going to show you is a little thing I like to do with MCP tools to just get some context of what's going on. And then also this will introduce how I like to do logging in these tools, since it's a little fiddly of how to do it. And then I'll also show you a new way of doing Oracle so you don't have to hard code things. So let's jump right into those three things. If you remember, we're working in the Easy Chat DM project here. You can go check it out, the GitHub repo. It'll probably have evolved by the time you watch this, because I'll have done more videos. But you can poke around in there and get a sense of the simple way that you can start making MCP servers. I use the MCP supported Spring AI, which is great. The Spring team works on the official Java SDK for Model Context Protocol, so it keeps up with it pretty well. And as you'll see with the tools, it's actually super quick to do it. Speaking of, let's look in the project here in our old friend IntelliJ, and I'm just going to show you a really simple tool to kind of jog your memory, and that is the Deterministic Oracle tool. Now, when you're solo role-playing, you often have things where you want to just randomly look things up, even yes or no, and that's exactly what this simple Oracle does. And you can see when you define a tool, what you're doing is this is going to be registered with Claude, as you saw in the first video. It's got a description, and the Claude, the AI, the model, the LLM will look over all these descriptions and just figure out when to use it when you're going about doing stuff. Now, this is what I showed in the first part, but I want to show you a key thing two key things I've added. First, I added in a parameter. Now, we didn't see that in the original one. In fact, let me just quickly show you what it looks like. You can have a tool like this without a parameter. Pretty simplistic. Of course, it's going to error out. But when you want to add in a parameter, I'm just going to paste it in. You have this tool parameter here, which is an annotation, and it takes a description. And the description it will be applied to Spring uses its magic to automatically use this as the tool parameter name, right? And so what I'm doing here, this is the get into the mind of the AI, is I'm asking it whenever it calls this method to tell me why, to give it some context of what it's doing. And in fact, let's improve this a little bit while we're here. We'll go with this longer thing, and so that we can do this stuff. Tell me the question of why you're doing it. Oh, yeah. Let's just go with what is the result of the action. For example, let's say, for example, what might you do depending on the result? So that's kind of fun. You can have it think, this might be interesting, to have it think ahead a little bit. So what this means is that, as I'll show you, when Claude gets around to calling this tool, it's actually going to pass in a little bit of text that'll be interesting to see. So how are you going to see that? So sometimes in Claude Desktop, which I use, you can see has a little window you can open up to see the call that it's done. But actually today, when I was doing it earlier, it doesn't let you expand that, which is fine. But one thing I didn't show in the first episode is logging. The reason logging is a little bit different is, if you remember, when you set up your stuff for you working with Claude, your MCP servers, you have to rely on standard input and output, standard IO. And so you turn off that Spring banner, because that will output a banner to standard IO and just screw everything up. And you turn off all console logging. So you've kind of turned off your way of logging stuff. Now, what you can do, of course, is you can turn on file logging. And what I do is I create a little dot directory just in my home directory that I'm going to start storing things. And you can see I've declared that in the application properties, because this is a Spring Boot application, which I probably should have mentioned. But you just you turn on logging for my package files, the Easy Chat DM. And then I put the log file in that directory. Let's go to my home directory and go to the Easy Chat DM directory. You can see I've been doing a lot of stuff there. This is the log that gets generated. We'll look at this some more, but you can see a lot of exciting stuff going on in there. So we've got that set up. So before we look at it, let's review real quick. We've got this deterministic Oracle be used for yes/no questions. It's going to call in and pass the context in, and then we're going to be logging what the question was and what the answer was. And so this will let us kind of peek into how the model is thinking. So let's start up Claude, and come in here. Now, I'm using this tool, I forget what it's called, Log Viewer, to just look at the logs. It's a lot easier. And I guess what I should mention, I showed you where one log was, right? Where the log that we created. Now, Claude likes to put its logs in a more official place, which I have open here. So if you look, this is going to be in your, on Mac OS at least, it puts it in the library logs Claude thing, which I think means the console application can open it. I don't know about that console application. But if we look in here, what you'll see is that it creates a log file for each MCP server. And I think this is just peculiar to how, not peculiar, but whatever MCP client you have, so Claude, it can decide what to do there. I don't think this is really part of the spec. What's interesting, so just looking at this log file, just for future reference, is it's polling for prompts and resources, two other types of NPC things. And I think, if I remember, it does it about every 5 seconds or so. I forget what the polling is, but it's a when it loaded up, it connected to the MCP server, and these are all the tool descriptions that it got, right? And so it's nice. It's logging the tool descriptions to you, and so you can start to see what they are. You know, I've configured the log viewer thing here to just pick up anytime it sees this string. Remember, I mentioned, you know, this is why I like to name these things like this, so it'll highlight what's going on there. And then let's look over at our own thing. We don't really log that much except that we started up. So we'll go over to Claude, and we've got this session going already. And so let's see what's been going on. Even Varda has carved a space to her workshop. Okay, so we looked into Varda's workshop, and let's see I'm going to try to prompt it, ask it something that will cause it to call that deterministic tool. So I'll say, I look into the workshop and ask Varda if she is interested in having lunch with me. Now, hopefully, this will cause it to ask the deterministic thing if it's yes or no. We'll see. So here, oh, that's good. So it's calling it. We'll see what happens. We'll allow it for this chat. Now, see, here in Claude, remember how I said it usually shows you the call, but for some reason, I don't know why, but it's turned that off. So as you approach, you're stuck. Walls are covered. What has she said? Lunch with a stranger? Oh no, she seems to not want to do it. But so here in our log, now let me just point it out to you, right? Remember, we asked it to pass in the context, right? And then we logged what the context was and what the answer was. So we can now look in our log, and you can see exactly what it was. Not really that thrilling. Is Varda initially receptive to Sven's invitation to lunch? So the whole point there being that it is interesting. You know, you can see how to use a tool parameter. You can pass in whatever kind of parameters you want there, right? I'm just using it for this context thing. And then once you can add in logging, which I just did with the standard logger factory there, you can start to collect interesting stuff that it's thinking. Like you can see, I don't know how I get it to call a subjective oracle, but I think I have another tool called looks, and I'll explain how this works in just a little bit. But you know, it will tell you what a description of something is. So let me see if we can get it to call it again and say, they've said, let's see. Before I answer, I look around the workshop. Let's see, how does it look? Usually you don't have to be this straightforward in asking things, and it picks up on the context of what to do. So once again, it's calling our method, which is great. Just so you know, remember, it comes in here, it's passing in the context, and I'm going to go over this thing where it's looking up a file there, and let's see what the result was. You look around, unexpected, bright, and welcoming atmosphere. Okay. So let's go to our log again, and you can see the appearance and details of the workshop where she is attempting to recreate lost dwarven art of stone lighting. So that's kind of fun, right? And you can see that it returned that. Now, one thing that might be fun to do with this, if I wanted to set up a whole separate log file that only is logging these interactions. And you could probably go into the actual MCP code and just have it log all of the back and forth traffic that's related to what you have. And then you could kind of go review it. And I don't know, use it to train up models, and I don't know what words I'm using here, but use it to kind of tune how the models work, or not. That may not be too interesting. There's also, like, eventually I'd like to get to the point where I can have like a log that's human readable of what is happening. That would be a little more complicated, because you would want to get the log of what's happening in Claude and then kind of interleave in these calls like this out to it. So you get like a full transcript of not only what you've been typing and what the response was, but the calling back and forth of stuff, which I think would be pretty interesting. So as promised, let me go over what is happening here. So this is the other thing that I like to do in these little tools is, if you remember our very basic deterministic tool, it's hard-coded. The answers are hard-coded in there, and then it just picks one out at random, right? Now, not really too great because you've got to hard-code it. But what you can do, you see, is create a whole separate file. So let's look at what I have stored in this looks file. So here, I think I copied this. Let me see where I copied this from. There's the person who does the plot unfolding machine. They have a project. We can go check it out. Where they also are doing some of this. They have a tool for doing this kind of introducing Oracle randomness into your game playing. And in doing that, I think their stuff is like Creative Commons attribution or whatever. But if you go dig down into it, you can see all these tables that they have, these kind of lists of things, right? And here's one about how things look. Like, for example, there's a lot of great tables in here, and you can probably imagine what I'm doing with a lot of these. Like, the prompty ones are actually a pretty great one he has, that if let's look at the travel one. Like, these ones, when you're solo role playing, you're supposed to use them when you're kind of stuck, and you can go to a prompty thing and just have it come up with one of these. So that's where this comes from. But let's open up the looks thing again, right? And you can see that it's just a list of all of this stuff. And you remember when I asked what the workshop looked like, it found like sunny, cheery, or whatever. So what I did, the second type of Oracle that I like to create, instead of it just being hard-coded, like that one or this one, is you load up that file, and you slice it into lines, and then you randomly select one. Now, I'll show you briefly, like, this is very boring. I have this one directory thing. I told you that I store everything in the .easychatdm directory, right? And this is just a class that gets loaded up by Spring Boot and is given that directory, and then it has the ability to retrieve files from that directory. Just standard thrilling stuff like that with the text files. The only little thing I did is I didn't really implement this in an elegant way, but I made it so down here so that you can actually add comments to the text file if you want. So let's look at this text file, right? Again, it's just got all this stuff, and then we'll go over. I'll show you in the chat DM directory, or the easy chat DM directory. You can see what I do is I put them in an Oracle subdirectory, and I haven't really automated doing this. I just do it manually, but there we are. They're right there. So then, if you open the Oracle back up, right, you'll see it's looking in Oracle's MPC motivation. Right. And, again, this is just for demonstration. You could do a lot more fancy stuff here. Like in the big chat DM project I have, I actually save the defaults in the class path so that it can create this directory on its own and all sorts of stuff like that. But that's overly complicated for here. So let's build this, and let's see if there's anything we want to change. But let's just go ahead and make sure we build and package it to make sure everything's cool. And then we'll restart Claude over here, just to make sure that we've got it. So that's how, when you looked in Claude, you saw that list of things that it picked from. So, there's another one. You can think of doing this for all sorts of things. Like, here's conversations, right? And I think, as I got this from the Juice solo role-playing system. Let's fix this empty one. But you can see what I did here is I took the original ones, and I went in and I asked, I think it was Claude, to just come up with more, right? So you can just keep piling and piling in these conversation topics. And in fact, I've already made the code. Let's start up Claude and see if we can get it to use this conversation thing. We'll go to her workshop and say, let's see, I try some small talk with her. What kind of conversation does she want to have? So we're waiting here. Her surprising, your work is fascinating. Most people, yep. So let's go look at what's even more fascinating are the logs. And let's see. So it loaded it up. Maybe I'm not actually logging what we're doing there. but you should be able to also see where it called out. Oh, you can also see in the log where it called out to the conversation thing, right? And apparently, I don't have it set up to actually pass the context in. So that's why we didn't see anything interesting, which is fine. Let's go ahead and add that in. I'm just going to copy that from here. Now, I did this for another one, and it didn't work. I'm not really sure why, but we don't need to... what am I doing wrong here? Yeah, there we go. So here, let's add that in and say like, so string topic, and then we'll say logger dot, we'll do info. And what is the, how were we doing this? I'll just copy the way that we were doing it before to be somewhat consistent. Okay, so we'll say conversations, Oracle called with that and that. And then we have the question context. Is that what I called this parameter? Aha, I wonder if that, but there's no actual tool there. Maybe that is what I messed up on. Let's see, string question context. Okay. Yeah, well, it wouldn't have, I'm looking down here because this other one was broken, but it wouldn't be working if it was question context and then topic. Okay. So here, yeah, and you can see it's from Juice. We've added this in. So previously, if this works, you can see that it didn't call in with an argument and we didn't receive any context for it, let alone log it. So let's quit Claude. And we'll do this. And, you know, when I'm demoing this, I'm very direct about kind of getting it to call the tools. Usually it figures out with the context. But let's say, I talk some more with her. What other topics is she interested in? Wouldn't it be nice if life were that easy? You could just kind of write to someone when you're doing small talk and be like, we do small talk. What are the topics? There you go. So it's calling out to it. Let's see if it actually, there you go. So let me pause this. So that you can see, but you can see now it's passing in the context. Now, I would actually like it to give a lot more context. I wonder, like, what you could do with that. So let's try something else that's interesting. And you know what I'm doing here is not really like necessary. It's just curiousness and poking around at it, which is part of the fun of doing this. It's part of playing with your solo role-playing stuff. But let's add just one more layer. And then I think we can wrap up. Now, let's say also provide any history of the conversation, if applicable. Any history of the conversation and history between the people, like NPC or PC talking, if applicable. All right. So maybe this will. How about and provide a brief summary of the NPC's state of mind and what they might do next. So let's work on getting this going here. So this is another thing that you can start thinking about when you're making these tools is, and this is where a security problem, you do some prompt injection kind of is you start thinking in terms of like natural language that you're doing. So these tools are not very natural languagey, right? They're very traditional deterministic, but the interface that they have back to Claude or whatever the MCP client is in natural language. So you are kind of telling it the types of parameters in the schema, but in these descriptions, you have the chance to like tell it what to do and guide it. And what you'll find is you need to tune these a lot to kind of go through this cycle over and over again of seeing how they work. And one thing I'm curious about is across the different MCP clients you have, whether it's Claude or you could be using like I think ChatGPT is going to have support for it. You could kind of wire up your own client to call out to Olam or whatever you want. Is what it does with these parameters, who knows? It's probably going to be slightly different between each of the different AIs that you're using. And in fact, I think, one of my former Red Monk colleagues, Fintan, pointed this out. I think the way that the various AI companies, what models they use, and how they interpret these descriptions and how they execute these tools will probably be kept secret because it's a point of differentiation, a way they can be better at things. And then if you're using it in like a more business context, that's also the kind of thing you'll want to pay attention to. So even though there's this little line here, right? There's a lot going on because this is like a core point of potential awesomeness or chaos between your very regular deterministic code and then just the AI doing whatever. So that's why it's one of the reasons why it's fun to mess around with this stuff. I just wanted to interject something that I talked with someone afterwards about this, which is if you look at what you have to do with these descriptions and also the text and other MCP things, what you're really doing is a lot of detailed documentation. You're using natural language as the API, not programming stuff. And if you think about most programmers, they're terrible at writing docs. They don't like writing documentation or documenting their code. And so this is going to be a big challenge that if you're writing these MCP agents, you're going to have to start documenting your code, not only what it does functionally, like this takes a string or this will return null if whatever, but you've got to talk about the intention, how you designed it, how you wanted it to be used. And that kind of, I don't know, kind of squishy, soft stuff, we even use those terms, it's not really how most programmers think. And in my experience, that's not anything they ever document. They don't really tell you what to do with something, how you should be using it. That's kind of more advanced stuff. So if you're programming these MCP things or any kind of agentic things, maybe revisit docs and how you think about that stuff and how you would explain it to someone, how you wanted them to use it. I forget, did we build this already? Let's just do it again. Through all that talking, I forgot what was going on. Now, start Claude back up and let's see if we can have more conversation. I tell her about my artistic pursuits, mostly in style. And then I talk more with her. What is the next conversation topic she's interested in? So let's see. Hopefully, we're going to have to give her permission. Hopefully we'll see some more context in there. You know, another thing to note is it doesn't call it at first. It like starts doing the da-da-da-da, and then when it's done with that, it moves on to there. So here... that was not a very fun result. So see, like you can't really, sometimes it's hard to get it to tell a lot of stuff. Oh, maybe let's try one more thing. Let's see if we're very specific. And we say the context must be at least 100, let's say 50 words long, but can be as long as, let's say 300 words. Which is a lot of words. So let's see, to that point of like messing around with the prompt, let's see if we can we can force it to actually give us more information. All right, we already have Claude stopped. All right, let's go back. Conversation, something more personal reminder. Okay, I'll tell her about the philosophy of my GNOME home, which is based on, I don't know, rubies. All right, let's see if it actually pays attention. Now, if it doesn't, that'll be an interesting thing to have seen, right? That somehow the whatever Claude's doing to run these MCP tools has been told to ignore long answers and in fact, like keep them clipped. It did pass in some more. This probably is, let's see how many characters this is. So we can open that in drafts, and you can see that it's only 24 words. So let's see, I forget what we told IntelliJ. It needs to be 50 words long. So it's actually ignoring my commands about what to do, which is kind of curious. So that's what I wanted to go over. A little bit of like getting into the mind of Claude, of your chat DM by trying to, at least as we saw, tell it parameters, the context to pass in. But you see that at least today with the Claude that I'm using, for some reason it's limiting the responses. I don't know, maybe that's in the spec somewhere or something like that. But then also I think what's really important, is to start logging what you're doing, especially as you're building this and playing around, whether it's to play Dungeons and Dragons or something else, because you'll start to get a sense of how things work. And I think, the main thing to emphasize there is like, think about the fact that you're doing things both in a regular programming context, very deterministic, as they say, procedural, but you've also got this natural language back and forth going, right? And you're trying to weld these two things together. So if you want to look at the code for that, I'll have it checked in here. Now, it might evolve by the time you check it out, but you can go to my Easy Chat DM repo here. There's a more advanced one I haven't updated in a while called the Chat DM project that does a lot more sophisticated stuff. But what I'm finding is I'm just replicating what's going on here, cleaning it up a little bit better. But, if you want to get started writing MCP servers, tools in particular, this is, I think, a great way to dive in. It's fun, and it's pretty simple to do, straightforward. And then in the next video, I think what I'll show you next is, like I said, how to have a directory full of those Oracle files and use 2 different oracles that will basically look at all of those files and then make it so that you can have these kind of hundreds of oracles to call, which necessitates the creation of a second oracle. And with that, you'll actually see how you can start to coordinate tools together to work with each other. So it'd be great to hear how you're having fun with this stuff. Any questions that you have? I think there's a lot to explore here. And, doing Dungeons and Dragons and these little MCP servers is a great way to kind of like figure out what agentic AI actually is and how it works. So we'll see you next time.